7 o'clock.
Thank you very much. Okay. Time is 7 p.m. on Monday, February 7th. I'm calling the Personnel and Administrative Affairs Committee to order. We are in the Aldermanic Chamber as well as via Zoom teleconference. To access Zoom, please refer to the agenda or the city's website for the meeting link. Currently, it is our first meeting of the legislative session with a new committee, so I have an acting clerk. So I'm going to ask Alderman Tebow to take the roll call, please.
Okay. Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
I'm here.
Alderman at Large Ben Clemens.
I am here.
Alderman Tyler Govia.
Here.
Alderman Tom Lopez.
Here.
Alderman Derek Tebow is here. We also have in the room with us Alderman Alex Camo, Alderman Patricia Klee, Alderman Lori Wilshire. Online we have Alderwoman Gloria Timmons and Alderman John Sullivan.
I believe that is everybody.
Yep.
Great. Okay. The first thing on our agenda is election of the clerk. Do I have a motion? Alderman Clemens.
Thank you. I move to nominate Alderman Tebow to serve as committee clerk for the term.
Okay, the motion is to nominate Alderman Tebow. Okay. Yep,
I move to close nominations.
great. The motion is to close nominations. We don't need to go by roll call. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. You are now formally our clerk.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
No, do I have to technically elect you now? I missed it, sorry. We have to then carry to elect.
Okay.
That's what it says here anyways. So is that so moved by you, Alderman Clemens?
Yes, I move that we vote to elect Alderman Tebow as the clerk.
Any discussion on that motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And none opposed. Okay, now you are formally our clerk.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have public comments. Please come to give your name and address for the record, please.
Lori Ortolano, 41 Berkeley Street. I'd like to address ordinance 22-2, allowing aldermen to participate in meetings through video teleconferencing to be presiding officer and conduct the meeting. I'm opposed to this ordinance. I think it's really important, particularly the presiding officers, that you have a presence in the chamber. I've testified quite a bit up in Concord. There's a lot of different legislation up there this year on remote meetings. Right to Know New Hampshire has been opposed to those types of meetings and switching to that format. I think our elected people really need to be here. And it's I know that we've been through a lot with the pandemic. I don't anticipate that we're gonna stay in it forever. And I don't think we can use the fear of COVID to keep us from coming out and participating. There's a lot of good things that happen when you're in a live meeting with people, and a lot of social cues and body language that tells you what's going on in a meeting that you don't get when they're not here. I have not liked the video conferencing done, particularly where elected people keep the video off, but they're on. I think we should be able to see our elected officers. I also think the video quality at times is intermittent, and as far as the telecommunications, the verbal, the communication, it's not great. The past 2 months have been a little spotty, a little tricky. I don't know why. I'm not complaining about it. It's just the nature of the beast. But I think it also makes recording minutes and having a record of the document that is so utterly important under RSA 91A for the broadest access to public information and public meetings to be obtained. So I would ask all of you to not support that and really embrace being in this chamber and being together and being among your citizens who come out and want to converse with you. I think more of us will come out as things get better and that we conduct business the way we've always done business. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Orlano. Did you say your name?
Laura Cajon. Laura Cajon.
Yep, I heard you, Ms. Cahoon. Go ahead.
Laura Cajon at 30 Greenwood Drive. I'm asking you to turn down the ordinance 22-002. I feel that it is only fair to the taxpayers that we elect, that we get what we're paying for. And I'm sorry to say that Shoshana Kelly, if she can't make the meetings, or Ben Clemens can't make the meetings, because of their social life or their business life, maybe they should resign. But at this point, the taxpayers have paid this, and we should get our money back. As far as the other aldermen, there's a lot of aldermen that have gotten, have benefited Miss Kelly's business, and I don't begrudge her that. But the problem is, all aldermen should stand up for the taxpayers, and we should be able to have this money back. And also, this is something that we need the people that are in charge to be physically there. If we don't have them physically there, why bother have the meetings? I'm sorry that this is something that, we're trying to get more people, more residents to be involved, and we need to have a physical location where all the aldermen show up and participate with the residents. Thank you.
Is there anyone else I don't see anyone online, and there's no one else in the chamber. Okay. Moving on, communications.
None?
Interviews. Tonight we have two interviewees that are both present via Zoom that I see. We have Maureen Borquette of 37 Jennifer Drive, who is a new appointment to, is that called Connection? Doesn't say.
I didn't think so. I thought it was Conservation.
Conservation Commission. It's just missing on the. So I would invite Maureen. The mayor cannot be with us this evening, but if you could just give us a little bit about yourself and why you're stepping forward for this role, that would be lovely.
Sure. Good evening, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Maureen Bork. I'm a resident here in Nashua, and for the past several months, I have been volunteering with the Conservation Commission to participate in a cleanup at the Wildlife Sanctuary, have been participating in observing in the Zoom meetings to become more familiar with how the Conservation Commission works. I am a recent graduate, 2021, of the Natural Resource Steward Program from the University of New Hampshire Cooperative Extension, where we're encouraged to become involved in the community as volunteers. I am a former healthcare worker, so I'm very much used to working with a team and a collaborative approach. And what I love that I learned from the Conservation Commission, as well as what I have learned from the Natural Resource Stewards Program, is the importance of being involved in the community and caring for those natural resources. I'm becoming more familiar with the wetlands. I'm becoming more familiar with the conservation land that's already been established in this community, which has been phenomenal, by participating with guided hikes with one of the commission members. So I'd love to be able, now that I'm retired, to be able to give back to the community, to become a steward here in Nashua, to be able to help with maintenance of that land, education of the public, and the goals of the commission in working with the city to optimize our natural resources here. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from the committee? I see Alderman Lopez.
Comments. So first of all, in order for my final comment to be put into context and me not to look like a flake, I'd like to say I'm glad that you've gone to the meetings already. You've done your due diligence. I appreciate the background and the experience that you bring to it. And then finally, I also just wanted to comment that your resume is like a work of art. It is succinct, it is specific, and it has literally all the traits I would want to see on a committee member. I was very impressed, and I didn't want to let it go without comment.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Just a heads up, one of the things that part of the National Resource Stewards Program does is teaches us how to do very concise communication. So we try very hard, and I'm also an artist as well, so thank you very much.
I think those traits can only help the Conservation Committee and its messaging.
Agreed.
Thank you.
All set, Alderman Lopez. Anyone else? Alderman Clemmons.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say thank you very much for coming forward to serve the committee, and I wish you well in your work ahead.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I just also wanted to comment, I thought that your resume was very perfectly aligned for Conservation Commission. I served on that at the beginning of my first term, and it's a great group of people. They've got a ton of knowledge, and it sounds like you will be a perfect asset. So we will take up your nomination later in the meeting. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Of course. Okay. Next we have for Cultural Connections, Sheena Bist of 4 Cobble Hill Road, with a term to expire February 28th, 2023. Sheena, could you, or Shanta. I hate it when people get my name wrong. I just did it like 4 times to you. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you just fine.
Thank you, everyone, for giving me this opportunity to be here today. My name is Shanta Best, and I live 4 Cobble Hill Road, Nashua. I've been living here almost 21 years now. But before that, I was in Durham, New Market area. I did my master's in chemistry from University of New Hampshire. After that, I worked for AstraZeneca R&D Boston as a synthetic chemist for several years. And I took a break in between, and since last year, I'm back to AstraZeneca again, working in a different role there. I support chemists. While doing all this, I've been involved in many community work. I'm from Nepal, and we have a committee called New Hampshire Nepali Community, and I have worked with that committee in different roles, from members all the way to currently I'm the president of that committee. And since 2018, I've been working with Deepa Mangalrat as well. So the chairperson of a Cultural Connection Committee, and she recruited me to volunteer with her. And I have brought the people, the kids, students, not only kids, but the adults from my community to volunteer in different areas. And the reason for me, and I really liked, because it gives an exposure to other communities of the city where I'm living. Even though it's a big community, Nashua is a big community, many different people from diverse community live here, we hardly get to know about each other. But this community gives me that opportunity where I can connect people from my community to other community and be involved, help each other in any way possible. That is the main reason I decided to apply for the membership. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to open up to questions. Alderman Tito.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just want to say, I thought your resume was you had so much experience, and it was pretty involved, which is great. And I love also that we have a Nepalese community in Nashua and in New Hampshire. I'm glad you're stepping forward. Thank you for that. And that's all I wanted to say. I just wanted to thank you for coming forward. And it's great to have more diversity in our city, and hopefully more in our government soon as well.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Alderman Lopez.
In reference to the resume, the first 4 pages of extremely impressive credentials suggest that you would not only be a great liaison for the community, but also a great inspiration for people looking to advance their education, their career, their degrees. Sometimes that can be difficult when you feel like you have to earn your place based on what other people think of you versus following a passion and being able to achieve success, overcoming a lot of different barriers. I was very impressed by the 5th page, the last series of qualifications or experiences, particularly being a Lion Club member, being a participant in the Cultural Connections Committee already. I think I have actually seen you in some of the meetings. But with all of the experience and the activities you have, one of the concerns due to the size of the Cultural Connection Committee is ensuring that there's quorum for the in-person meetings that they have. Is the time for the Culture Connections Committee something that's accessible to you, that you'll be able to participate in, monthly?
Yeah, I mean, in person, that's a very good question, and that's going to be a struggle for me. I won't be able to do every month. That's something I would like to know a little bit more about, but I can do every other month.
That's, like I said, it's understandable that on committees where there's a large membership, not every member will be present, but it is important, obviously, for everybody to communicate with the chair if they are or aren't, so that you don't have 12 people show up in the morning and everyone has to leave, or there aren't enough people there, So it is a challenge, but I was just curious because one of the things that the Cultural Connections Committee has struggled with, even since when I was the chair, is when do they meet that people can go? If you go during the day, then all the city departments can represent and be effective liaisons to community issues that are being brought up. If you go in the evening, it's more accessible to some parents, but not, the parents with kids and activities and night jobs. It's always tricky trying to figure out exactly when you can get the best representation. So I appreciate your willingness to stand to that position, and I respect the credentials and the experience that you're bringing to it.
Thank you very much. My plan is to, since I have some flexibility of being able to work from home as well, and my company always, they promote, they encourage people to volunteer. So I think I can find that not every month, but every other month, whenever there's more important topic being discussed, I would like to be present in those meetings, and I'll try my best to be there.
I think they can use your
And
insight.
I'll wait. Yes, thank you.
All set, Alderman Lopez?
Yep.
Alderman Wiltshire?
Thank you for stepping forward. This is a really important committee, and I appreciate you stepping forward. And if you were brought on board by Deepa Mangalat, you're okay with me. She's also a wonderful volunteer here in the city, so thank you for your willingness to serve on this.
Yeah, I'll do my best, and I really appreciate that you're giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Okay. I also see Alderwoman Timmons.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Biss, for joining the Cultural Connection. I read your resume, I was very impressed as well. I do have a question. You said you're currently leading a group of kids in the community-based services. Can you just give me an example of what you're talking about when you say you lead this group of children in the community services?
Yes. So in New Hampshire Nepali community, the committee itself is, we are mostly adults, over 40 years old, and we feel like, if we cannot involve our kids to do more volunteer work, over time there'll be nobody to replace us. Not only that, we want them to be, get connected with their local community as well. So these kids, mostly from our community, we have kids, we created this subcommittee called New Hampshire Nepali Youth Network. There are almost now, when I started, were like 16 kids. Now it has grown up to be 30 kids. So they have done different, activities. Recently they're involved in winter clothes drive. Besides that, for this upcoming Valentine's Day, some kids are, making cards and writing letters for veterans. And also they're planning to send some gifts to, children's home, things like that. So they are doing that. On top of that, last year, some of the kids, they did culture program through the Zoom. And then they collected some money. They were able to collect some funds. So they utilized part of this to donate, I forgot the name of the organization, like Find Child America, something like, I'm sorry, I cannot remember the name of the organization, but I think it's a Find Child America, one of the organization. They decided among themselves to send some part of money they collected to this organization, and some of the money they sent to the kids who were really, doing school orphanage, where they're really struggling back in Nepal. These are the type of activities they are doing. So these are some examples.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure when I hear something positive that's going on in the community.
Yeah.
And one of my goals is to visit Nepal in the future.
Of course.
Next 5 countries I'm gonna do in May, but yes, I am gonna go to Nepal, but the kids, working with kids is phenomenal, and thank you very much, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, me too, thank you.
Okay, anyone else in the chamber Alderman Clemmons?
Just briefly, thank you very much for your service. I appreciate you stepping forward.
Okay,
Thank you, I appreciate that.
thank you so much for being here. We will take up your nomination at the later part of the meeting. We appreciate your willingness to serve. Okay.
Thank you.
We have applications to license hawkers, peddlers, itinerant vendors license.
None?
And appointments by the mayor.
So we need a motion.
Yeah, and I think everybody who's here should be set except for we didn't interview Cheryl, so I think the rest of us can go. And this last one.
What's those?
Yeah.
Which one?
So down through this guy
Okay.
and then through this last one.
Good. Okay.
Because they weren't here to interview.
So does somebody need to make a motion?
You can, please.
Okay. So I'm going to make a motion to recommend confirmation of the following reappointment to the Auditorium Commission. Paul Laflamme, with a term to expire December 31st, 2024.
You can keep going.
The following new appointment and reappointments to the Conservation Commission: Maureen Bork, Jedediah Crook, Sherry Dutzy, Gloria McCarthy, and Brandon Perotti, all with terms to expire December 31st, 2024. The following new appointment to the Cultural Connections Committee: Shanta Bist, with a term to expire February 28th, 2023. The following reappointments to the Mines Falls Park Advisory Committee: Richard Gillespie, with a term to expire December 31st, 2024, and Stacy Vigno, with a term to expire January 31st, 2024.
Heard the motion. Is there any discussion on that motion? Alderman Walsh.
Also, you have John Griffin under
So-
all those 3 or 4 things.
Yeah, I also saw Cheryl, but we didn't talk to her, so that's why we skipped it.
I'm sorry?
I said there was also one for Cheryl, but we didn't interview her. So that it's a new appointment, but she wasn't here to be interviewed. That's why I think that we would skip it, correct? Generally? Okay.
She wasn't listed to interview.
Huh?
She wasn't listed to interview.
She wasn't in. I'm sorry?
That's why I couldn't hear it. Who were you missing?
We didn't interview for a new appointment to the Conway Ice Arena. We didn't interview Cheryl and Linder. And then there was a new appointment to the BPW Retirement System Trustees, which is John Griffin. If the committee would wish to push those forward without interview, I'm fine with that as well, but generally we interview. Alderman Lopez.
Especially when it's a new appointment, I prefer to interview them. But I would also wonder if the replacement is time sensitive in any particular way. I know, particularly John Griffin, it says is replacing David Fredette as treasurer.
Yep.
I would want to, depending on when they're actually meeting, maybe we shouldn't wait. Interviewing our own, financial officer seems a little redundant. We know him.
It sounds what you're saying is that you would like to include at least.
Yes, I'm saying I appreciate and I endorse the idea of vetting newcomers that are going to be serving on boards and making sure that we know where their backgrounds are. But like city staff, maybe not, and particularly if they're on boards that might need their expertise.
Okay. What do other members think? Alderman Collins.
Yeah, I agree with Alderman Lopez. I also think that in the case of Cheryl Linder, she definitely has the background in sports management to be able to do that arena job. So I'm comfortable with both of them.
Okay. Alderman Gavia.
I feel confident as well of pushing these through just solely because they're familiar faces to all of us here on the board. I feel there's no need to really re-interview for positions we know they're qualified for.
Okay. Sounds like we're in agreement to add the 2.
I would just like to point something out though.
Alderman Lopez.
Cheryl's term is indefinite, so I wasn't sure if people would feel differently if they knew that it's
That was-
an infinite
I
position.
saw that as well. Alderman.
I think that needs to be clarified, because I believe that that is an indefinite term at the pleasure of the mayor.
Yeah.
So it's not indefinite, but it's indefinite at the pleasure of the mayor.
Okay.
Sounds like the consensus is let's include them
And-
and move them forward. Alderman Clemens.
And the same thing is the one with John Griffin is the same thing.
Okay. Do you want to reread it and add those two, since it sounds like that is the pleasure of the committee?
Sure. Motion by myself to recommend confirmation of the following reappointment to the Auditorium Commission. Paul Laflamme with a term to expire December 31st, 2024. The following new appointment and reappointments to the Conservation Commission: Maureen Bork, Jedediah Crook, Sherry Dutzy, Gloria McCarthy, and Brandon Perotti, all with terms to expire December 31st, 2024. The following new appointment to the Conway Ice Arena Commission: Cheryl Lindner, with an indefinite term. The following new appointment to the Cultural Connections Committee: Shanta Bist, with a term to expire February 28th, 2023. The following reappointments to the Mine Falls Park Advisory Committee: Richard Gillespie, with a term to expire December 31st, 2024, and Stacy Vigno, with a term to expire January 31st, 2024. And the following new appointment to the BPW Retirement Systems Trustees Committee, Business and Industrial Development Authority, and Tax Increment Financing District: John Griffin, with an indefinite term, by roll call.
I don't believe we need roll call because everyone's here in person.
Okay.
Everyone's heard the motion? Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion carries. Congratulations to those who are still with us this evening. You'll be sworn in at full board meeting. Okay. Unfinished business.
None?
New business resolutions.
None?
New business ordinances.
Okay, we have O-22-001, dissolving the substandard living conditions aldermanic special committee. Motion by,
So you would move for final passage, and that opens up the discussion.
okay, we move for a final passage on that.
Alderman Wilshire.
Thank you. I brought this, this ordinance forward because I believe that the Substandard Living Conditions Committee, and I believed it in the beginning, is actually more of a function of the Human Affairs Committee. We had an incident back in September of 2015 with the Country Barn Motel was featured on the Travel Channel, Hotel Impossible. The living conditions were deplorable. There were bloody mattresses, there were used needles, there were bed bugs. It was just terrible. I mean, they rated it the worst hotel in the country. And it got some makeover. They got a couple of contractors to come in and start fixing up a room and kind of showing the landlords how to, you know, what they need to do to invest and to keep people, good people there. There was a lot of drug activity there. I think a lot of that has, I'm not saying all of it, but I think a lot of it has kind of calmed down and it seems to be going better than it had been for many, many years. So I think this committee is kind of redundant. I think the work that has, well, they haven't had any business for the last few years. They haven't had any legislation. They did meet and talk, you know, to code enforcement and things like that, but we could do that just as well at the Human Affairs Committee. Human Affairs Committee is responsible for affordable housing, and this would qualify under that. So for those reasons, I would like to dissolve the substandard living conditions. Even the title isn't good. It could have been building an improvement committee or something, but that's why I brought this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Wilshire, for the explanation. Let us see what, yeah, Alderman Clemens.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Alderman Wilshire. I think that really that it should be, this type of conversation should be mostly dealt with in the Human Affairs Committee. The majority of the topics that would fall under this, because basically that's the committee where a lot of money goes and flows into that might we might want to take advantage of to take care of some of these problems. A lot of the employees that work for the city are familiar faces to the committee members on that committee who you might want to talk to in regards to a topic like this. So I think that, you know, not really expanding the role, but moving the role of this under Human Affairs kind of consolidates everything. I think it makes more sense. So I fully support doing this.
Alderman Lopez.
So I just want to make it clear to the public, at least as far as I'm concerned, and I believe, I'm not going to speak for my other alderman, but we're aware that substandard living conditions do exist and continue to exist in the city. It is an area that we receive constituent concerns about, and we'll generally work with landlords, we'll work with the housing authority, we'll try to find resolutions. And as Alderman Wilshire brought up, we didn't create new legislation specific to this topic as at the committee level. I chaired it for its second term, I think. But we were able to be a forum for people to come and discuss issues that we're facing. It was an opportunity for city departments to educate the public and the aldermen with efforts that they were working on, with challenges that they had in working on those issues. I think a lot of us on the committee didn't fully understand the ongoing zombie horde that bed bugs can represent. And so public health was able to kind of explain that landlords can't just quickly make them go away. But there were also some roles and some issues where there really was a power disparity between landlords and residents, and there are areas that the city can help with. And we were able to resolve a lot of that without creating new legislation or new laws. So the idea of the public being able to connect with us at the board in order to express concerns about things that are happening is certainly valid. I agree that it fits under the Human Affairs Committee's mission and model, and I just wanted to assure the public that we are aware that there's a need for new housing, and we are working on development projects and on economic opportunities and public and private partnerships to try to create new housing. We are also aware that we need to maintain aging housing and that we need a community that has landlords and tenants that both have consistent ideas of what constitute a home. I think we did a lot of good work with the committee over its lifetime, and it changed from special committee to committee, but one of the most important concerns that we had, at least the last meeting that I chaired, was did its former mission really meet what we were doing? Because we were concerned that it did start in response and reactive to a specifically bad situation. In fact, most of the committee's work in its first term wasn't focused on that place explicitly. It was focused on other rental places that it was trying to explore what exactly is the role of the city when they're working with, providing housing for people on a cost-effective basis. What are we enabling? So there was a lot of work that was done. I think its focus needed to become more encompassing of situations that moved beyond what it was originally precipitated for, and I think we were able to do that, and we will be able to do that with Human Affairs as situations present themselves.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Alderman Lee.
I just want to make sure the other members that, other members from your committee had spoken.
You're good.
Okay, thank you. I'm not opposed of, I'm not on your committee, and I'm not really opposed to killing this, as long as the Human Affairs Committee will in fact hear cases such as what Alderman Lopez had spoken about. I was never on this committee, but I attended it and brought a lot of different issues through, and bed bugs was one of my big ones for bringing forward through and so on. And I don't want to disparage landlords, but too often the landlords weren't there. And they also had the frustration, bed bugs are they didn't necessarily bring them in, they were brought in by somebody else, so who's responsible for it? And during that case, innocent renters were having to deal with it themselves. Children had bites, being afraid to go forward and make a complaint to the city because the city can't go in to an apartment without having a complaint from someone who's already occupying that space. So if that person got very disgusted and said, that's it, I'm moving, and then let the city know the city couldn't do anything because it's an unoccupied space. And then once it became occupied, unless that person complained. So we didn't have any mechanism, and truthfully, I'm working on some way of changing that mechanism, but I just want to make sure, and I hear from everybody, that the Human Affairs Committee is a place that someone could bring these issues, and how would that mechanism work? Would it be an alderman such as myself would go to the chair and say, this is an issue that I'm seeing, and so on, somewhat what we did with the substandard committee, or without having to necessarily do legislation, trying to get the education and so on. And having said that, I would strongly suggest, seeing the Human Affairs is taking this committee, this role, that we do what we did for substandard and get city staff to come in and educate the members as to the role of the city for code enforcement, for adequate style of housing, and so on. Just a recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm sure that Alderman Lopez will back me up as the chair of Human Affairs, but he has a pretty storied history in this, and I'm sure that he and myself as the vice chair can make sure that there's still that mechanism. I definitely don't think we want to lose any ability to hear and support the substandard living condition things that have been coming up over the past years. I think it's just efficiency of being able to approach them in additional ways, especially with all the rehab and stuff that we're doing, so we can continue to improve the housing conditions in general.
I would just like, if possible, to have a clear avenue how this gets to the Human Affairs Committee without it necessarily having to be legislation. In the past, people came to the substandard committee and spoke and so on. And I think that's how things got done. I think that's how education got done. So, I mean, short of us doing legislation, that's the only way I can see it happening. So just a comment. But I understand that not a lot was being done in the substandard committee. I think it was kind of a catch-all type of thing. Meetings weren't happening quite as much. So it does make sense to dissolve it. I just don't want to lose that aspect that we can offer to the public. Thank you.
Alderman Wilshire, do you want to just approach that? I mean, I think that's a good logistical question.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I feel that this current chair and the past chair of Human Affairs have adequate knowledge, and they know a lot, especially Alderman Lopez, about what's going on in the community, you know, who needs help, how they get it. He's connected. I think Alderman Lopez is very connected to the community, especially the people in need, right, Tom?
Try.
You do, and I think you do a really good job at it, and I think Alderwoman Kelly is an asset there as well. I was reading some of the substandard minutes before I brought this forward, and there was a lot of talk. You know, code enforcement was here, and you know they got a list of landlords which they hadn't had in the past, and phone numbers and addresses and things that the fire department could use, police department could use. I mean, really, if you go back and read some of the minutes, it's quite enlightening. So I think carrying over will just happen. This was set up as a one-item committee, and we did get some good traction out of it, but it didn't have the oomph. It just needed to be, I think, merged into the Human Affairs Committee, because we don't need another standing committee, and there was never any legislation for it. And I think the Human Affairs Committee is where it should have gone in the first place. So,
Thank you.
thank you. Alderman Lopez.
I think we can anticipate that as a topic presents itself to the Human Affairs Committee and people attend that committee and then discuss that topic, then more topics will follow that, because generally that's how any useful effort begins. So I'm happy to have that meeting to present like different challenges and that types of things that are happening. I also think we have public comment at Human Affairs, so it's not a question of whether people have access to it. It's a question of whether they know that that's something that it does. And that's where the more items and discussion points that we have on the topic, people will start to recognize, okay, well, that's a role of the Human Affairs Committee. And so that may be one of the objectives of separating substandard living conditions as a distraction. If people think that that's the only place you can go to, and Human Affairs is meeting regularly and has all of these other things going on, they're missing an opportunity. So I think consolidating it helps clean the message. We do, on the committee, have to attend to issues that come up that fall under that category, and keep that open format. I think if we make it about me as the chair and my connections and my momentum now, we run the risk of the things I don't know. So it's wiser, I think, to make the committee absorb this type of work and activity as part of its mission of human affairs, rather than specifically having a substandard living conditions committee designed for troubleshooting and that requires somebody to be chairing it that has a specific interest and focus in this area. So I think ultimately it's just going to be up to us to make sure that we take on business legitimately that addresses these concerns. And as we do that, the public will recognize that this is where they can talk about things that are going on. And I would also point out that a lot of what the Substandard Living Conditions Committee did wasn't to create a new place for the public to go. It was to point out who they should be talking to. We found a lot of interesting miscommunications or misinformation points where the public believed that, oh, I go to the code enforcement department for this and it was a public health issue, or I go to, the mayor's office for this and it's really a question for New Hampshire legal assistance. So we don't have to be the solution to every problem, but it would be good for us to be available as a solution for figuring out where to go for the problem.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Alderman Gouye. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
You're rating my blind spot over there.
No problem. Thank you. I do agree. I think it should be dissolved, and to go off of what a lot of people have said before is that as long as the issues are still being talked about in human affairs, then I don't think there's a need for a substandard living conditions committee itself. And if everybody at Human Affairs feels they can accurately still continue the business that's being done, I know it's not much, but can be at least the point of communication for residents who feel it is important, then I think it should be done. But I think it is just making sure the public knows that the job really isn't done. It's still continuing, just as part of another committee. It's not saying we're stopping caring about legislation for substandard living. It's continuing it just under a different committee name. Thank you.
Alderman Kamal.
Yeah, just to kind of echo what everybody has already said, I do think this is a good idea to dissolve this committee and roll it up into Human Affairs. The only concern that I had, and it's not really a concern, it's pretty minor. The definition of the Human Affairs Committee just says affordable housing, so I don't know if it would be prudent to update that description. The way the ordinance is written now, it's just to strike the Substandard Living Conditions Committee, but there's no language in the current ordinance to add anything to the description of the Human Affairs Committee. I think maybe, an extra line adding some of these duties of the committee that we're striking to the Human Affairs Committee, just so that future reference we know exactly what that committee is supposed to handle, might be a prudent thing to do. That's all.
Anyone else? Alderman Lopez.
In recognition of that comment, I really like it, but I also think that I don't even know if legally we can amend one committee while dissolving another one, but if we did, nobody would be able to find out where that originated. So that might be a topic of discussion at some point with the Human Affairs Committee to decide whether we need to amend it or ask the president to change something or edit it. That way it's all in the right area.
To clarify, you're thinking this is step one and on alternate?
I think it's a very good suggestion. I just don't think it could be done this way without just causing confusion.
Okay. Anyone else? Am I seeing anyone on Zoom? Anyone in the room? All right, the motion is for final passage of O22-001 to recommend final passage. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion carries.
All right, O-22-002, allowing alderman participation in meetings through video teleconferencing to be the presiding officer and conduct the meeting. I motion for final passage by roll call.
Motion is to recommend final passage by roll call. Discussion on the motion. Alderman Clements.
Okay, so as we know, through the pandemic, we've become more familiar in the ease of Zoom with doing meetings and things like that. And we've had the opportunity, I believe, in the past to be able to conduct a meeting while people are here in the chamber where the presiding officer is remote. And so I wanted to kind of walk people back in time a little bit to how this originally came around. So it was the legislature, I believe, passed legislation in, I don't know, I think it was 2009 or 2010, that allowed for public bodies to have members participate remotely via what they call telephone. And at the time, the legislation was silent on whether or not cities and towns would have to adopt that in order to be able to participate with it, or if it was an automatic thing or whatever. So we, at the Board of Aldermen at the time, decided to adopt in our ordinances per the state law that we would allow aldermen to participate via telephone. And of course, we follow the state guidelines on that. But one of the things at the time that we added to our own rules on that, separate from the state law, was that we weren't going to let the presiding chair participate. You could participate as the chair in the meeting and you can vote, but we wouldn't let you be the presiding officer if you were participating via telephone. Now, if you all think about that, that makes a lot of sense, because if I pick up this phone and I've got it like this, I don't know what's going on. I have no eyes, ears, or anything in the chamber. I don't know what's happening. So at the time, that prohibition made sense because you were strictly on a telephone. There was no video. There was no interaction really back and forth. You actually had to like hit a key in order for the beep, you had to do that in order for the chair to recognize you, to call on you. So we've moved on from those times. We're far advanced now to the point where a chairman can have a point person in the room and can really conduct the meeting effectively, in my opinion, as long as they do it via teleconference. So this keeps the restriction for the phone. So you can participate via phone. If you're like me and you like to go camping, and maybe telephone is the only way that you can participate in a meeting, you still have that option. But in this case, what it's saying is if you're the chairman, if you have access to Zoom, you'll be able to continue to run the meeting. So I just think what this does, in my view, is bring us into the 21st century. And, the other thing about it is too, my opinion on this is we give it a test run. There's nothing that says that if in the future it becomes a disaster, we can't take it back. And the other part of that is we're all adults, we're responsible people, if we're having connection issues, if I'm the chairman of a committee and I'm having connection issues, I'm going to say to my vice chair, you know what? Take over the meeting for me. It's just not gonna work for whatever reason. You know, and I think we're all adults. I think we can handle ourselves appropriately. I think that's what the people elected us here to do. And I hope that, you know, we can try to move ourselves forward into the next century. So that's why I think this is a good idea, but I'm happy to hear other people's opinions.
Alderman Lopez.
So I want to begin by saying Alderman Kelly has been targeted several times in public comment with regards to her attendance, and this was related to the legislation that we have every year to oversee attendance. And I would like to point out on her behalf, if it's okay, that she had children with COVID. She was restricted from coming in. A lot of her absences were understood by the board in general that the public may not be fully aware of. I think the previous year she had a child and was out for a couple months or a couple weeks for that as well. So there are circumstances where aldermen are not going to be able to attend in person. There are also aldermen who, at the last 2 terms that I've served on, we've had aldermen with extremely acute medical conditions who it was dangerous for them to come in, but they're an elected official. They're capable of doing the job as long as we make a reasonable accommodation for them. So I don't think this legislation is an indictment of teleconferencing. And I don't think it should be seen as the effort of specific aldermen to avoid actually having to come in and be an alderman or be accessible to the public. I think it has some merit in terms of it recognizing advances in communications, but I have some concerns as well. The first is, when I go to Honduras, or when I go on vacation, or I go elsewhere, and I participate in a meeting anyway, I consider that because if it's accessible to me and I can still represent people of Ward 4, I will make the effort to do so. But I wouldn't necessarily consider my positioning and my capability to participate to be on the level of being a chairperson. Being a chairperson takes a lot of preparation, it takes attentiveness and attention to the meeting, and focusing that attention and that input through teleconferencing can be difficult. So personally, I would be reluctant to try to chair a meeting remotely if I were on vacation or something to that effect. I think that would be where I would at least have my vice chair do it, because they're focused on the moment, they're focused on the situation. I'm also concerned that in a situation where people are present physically and a chair is participating remotely, there's not equal access to the people in the room. You can see right now we have the last speaker's picture is up on the Zoom. Your visual observation of the room is centered on the speaker. So we'd have to make allowances and changes to that and make sure that the chair can actually see the whole room and can see hands going up and make allowances for that. And that's an extra step. That's extra contingency planning and adjustments that need to be made. We did successfully do that during the 2020 pandemic, and when we were forced by the governor's emergency meeting not to meet in person. So it is possible to do that, but that's when most of the members are going to be online or also virtual, because the entire format shifts. So I think having virtual chairmanship of a in-person meeting, I'm not sure that that's entirely consistent. I would like to see personally this ordinance amended so that if a meeting had its majority of its quorum as remote, then and there was such an emergency condition in place that we couldn't all meet and it was going to be a virtual meeting, then it was clear that that could be chaired and managed in that circumstance. But I don't know that this should necessarily be a business as usual way of doing things. I think Zoom is important. I think teleconferencing is important. I think some of our public commenters tonight were able to access our meeting that may have had difficulty otherwise because of that opportunity. So I appreciate the value that it brings. I just would be concerned about those barriers for a chair to effectively chair a meeting, especially when technology or the logistics of it can become a new challenge.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Alderman Wilshire?
Thank you. I'm concerned about this legislation for a number of reasons. First is a quorum issue, like getting people, and it kind of puts the burden on other people to show up. An alderman at large, well, it's only an alderman at large that can make a quorum. So I think it puts a burden on other aldermen if the chair's not here. But we also have a vice chair. So, you know, to me, if the chair can't be here, the vice chair should be called upon to run the meeting. And the other thing I don't really like is the trouble and the disruption we have with Zoom. It's not a great science. I mean, it's okay, we can get by with it, but to run regular meetings at all times through Zoom, I don't think it fits. I don't think it's a good fit for us here. I would just as soon go back to full-time everybody here meetings and, you know, I mean, I think I'm waiting for the day where they say we don't have to wear masks and, you know, people would have to call in, but I wouldn't be surprised if we just got rid of Zoom. I mean, it's a lot of work for the videographer. They don't like it. It's too much trouble for them, especially when they have people at home and you know, a lot of people, if we have a contentious subject and a lot of people show up, or a subject that isn't contentious that everybody wants, they have a hard time managing it too. And I've talked to Kim Kleiner about it, and she said Jeff is just, you know, kind of struggling. It's a lot of extra work for them. So those are my concerns. The capacity for phone calls, we only have 2. So there are only 2 lines available. So there are only 2 aldermen that could call in, and that's how it always was in the past. But my concern really is this technology doesn't fit. That's just my 2 cents.
Thank you. I have to agree that I just don't think this is the right kind of move to make, to be a presiding chair over Zoom. Would that mean that the vice chair has to be in person? Because if both were via Zoom and then say the connection went out, who would run the meeting at that point? That was one of the major questions I had. And to go on to that point is, the point of having a vice chair is to carry out the duties if the presiding chair wouldn't be able to make it. So I think we kind of have that fallback there for them. So I think that would be, the whole point would be to have the vice chair run the meeting when the chair can't be there. And I feel just reading the room, as a lot of us do when we have people in the gallery, is very important. And I don't think you could get that full feel via Zoom when you're looking at either the last speaker or whoever else might have spoken more recently. You have their picture popping up. I'm all for people participating on Zoom. I think you can be a very active member on Zoom. You could be a good board alderman or at large on Zoom. I just don't think you could be a presiding member on Zoom.
Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So, you know, I'm going to be a little wishy-washy, and I'm sure my detractors will love this. But, you know, I come from, you know, working at a company, health insurance company for a long time and leading teams. And when we started to do at-home meetings or Zoom meetings way before the pandemic, I didn't love it. And, you know, the thing with those big companies is people aren't in the same state, so you couldn't meet necessarily in the same room. And there was always issues with them. And to me, if you guys have seen me, I've been at these meetings even before I was an alderman, sitting live in the crowd as much as I could. I like meeting the people. I like being here. I think people should be able to meet the public. You know, right now we're just meeting Lori every time because no one else is coming. But, you know, at some point, hopefully they will be. And, you know, for me personally, I do like that. I love that interaction with people, and I like seeing everybody in here. And, you know, for everybody that said things with challenges with Zoom, I do agree with that. We do have issues with that. The flip side is, you know, on nights like this, but the thing is, we all got to deal with the same thing, right? We're all dealing with the ice or the snow or whatever, so why should one person get to stay home? Everybody else has to come in for a quorum. But I will say, I do think it should go to the full board for a vote. So I think it deserves everybody's vote on it. So I will probably say yay to tonight. I may change my mind tomorrow, but I'm probably going to go against it unless I can be convinced, or unless I really think about everything everybody said tonight and decide that I should vote to pass it tomorrow, or whenever it gets on the board. Thank you.
Alderman LaPlante?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm not for this, and I'm going to give it a perfect example. While I think you are an incredible chair, and I've complimented you for when you were on Human Affairs, and you will do a phenomenal job on this, there was one meeting where you did preside via Zoom, and it was difficult, to say the least. I was your point person, and while I think I'm a very competent person, I just felt like I was stumbling, trying to balance who was on Zoom that wanted to speak versus to who was there. I think the chair who runs and controls the meeting, when I was chair of State Federal Relations and Veterans Affairs, one of the things I would always say is, my room, my rules, because I had to control the room. I had to control if we had a rowdy gallery. I had to control if, for some reason, the members were getting out of line. So the chair is not only conducting the meeting, and you do a phenomenal job, but also policing the meeting. And I think it's extraordinarily important for that person to be here. I would suggest much what many of the members said here, if for some reason the chair couldn't make it. And I believe we would all have good reasons if we could not physically be here. I don't believe anybody is making a mistake, and I think it's unfair that you've been attacked in any way, shape, or form. But the bottom line is, I think it should be pushed to the vice chair. And if the vice chair couldn't do it, I have no idea how that would happen. I know that Madam President can come in and has sat in that seat many a time. So I think that we should go with that. I personally am getting very weary of Zoom. While I think it's great that the public can interact and so on, I too have gone back and forth with poor Jeff and the rest of the staff, and they are at their wits' end. Every day they're here an hour to 45 minutes ahead of time, trying to set everything up, trying to troubleshoot, and just think about how many meetings that we've had that have been delayed just because Zoom wasn't working. CTV was working, we were all happy here, but Zoom wasn't working. So I hope as the masks go and as COVID goes, so does Zoom. Just my opinion. Thank you.
Alderman Clark?
Well, you guys are all really lucky because I had a really long set of prepared remarks.
You always do that.
I no longer have to say
You're gonna have
almost
a bottle
any
of
of
water,
it.
take your time.
I can't argue with anything that was said tonight. That's basically how I feel. I don't understand how you could possibly chair a meeting from Zoom. It just, you can't see when people have their hands up. You can't see what's going on in the gallery. And with respect to what Alderman Clemens said, if you need to have a point person in the room to manage the meeting for you, then that person should just chair the meeting. You know, we all have constraints on our time. I don't think that any of us think that people on Zoom are staying home because they want to attend the meeting in their pajamas. We all have lives outside of City Hall. In 2 weeks, I'm going to be away from business, so I'm going to have to Zoom into my Finance Committee meeting. I don't think I can clerk it via Zoom, so that's going to be something that we're going to have to discuss. But the technological difficulties, you know, we had a budget committee meeting 2 weeks ago that I Zoomed in, we couldn't hear the chamber couldn't hear the Zoom. If something like that happens and we lose the chair, you know, it's just at the very least, it's going to hold the meeting up. And it just, I think it adds a level of complication that we're really not solving a problem here with a vice chair and with aldermen at large that can step in. And the other issue I had that Alderman Wilshire brought up was the issue of quorum. If we have too many members on Zoom, are we even legally holding a meeting, or is that something we would have to address, you know, in the code? So I definitely don't think that this is a great idea. I know I don't vote on it tonight, but if it comes before the full board, I would not support it as currently written. I just think that it's not solving a problem, and so why do it? That's all.
Thank you, Alderman Clevens.
Thank you.
Then Alderman-
I appreciate everybody's comments, and you know, it's funny because one of the things, I took one of those tests that basically, it was actually a financial test, and it said, how risk averse are you? And I'm not. At all. I don't have any fear. Apparently, like, I am one of those people that I'm willing to try anything and see if it sticks to the wall. Which I'm willing to try this as well, which is why I was willing to sponsor it and see if it, you know, would work. So I certainly think that that we can figure this out, but I also respect my colleagues who have a little less are a little less ready to just go with the flow, I guess.
More conservative.
But I will say a little bit off topic though, and since other people brought it up, I do want to make sure that Zoom is something that is here to stay. Because I think it is good for the public. I think it is good for people to be able to participate that way. I think it's mostly good for the public. Because if you're not able to get down here to City Hall, you can still offer your opinion. And I also think it's good for our city employees who might have other things going on, but need to attend a committee meeting and can do so from home. So I just, since others brought that up, that's my opinion on that. I hope that that's something that's here to stay regardless, because I do think that it's been a useful and helpful tool. So, thank you.
Can I weigh in and then go to you?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
sorry, I was waiting
That's all
to let
right.
everybody speak first. I think that this has been a great discussion. I think that there's a lot of points that we've all kind of been batting around here. It has been brought up that I own my own business, and I've been seeing the nature of work change in general. I didn't want this to necessarily be a referendum on Zoom, but I think it has something that has become part of our lives in this pandemic, and we've figured out how to do it, and we've done it pretty efficiently. Yes, occasionally things go down. Is it hard to train people over Zoom? I'll tell you, yeah, I have employees that's been, you know, a piece that I've had to work through. But I think that the nature of this piece is literally just to say the way that this was written was when we used phone. We don't just have phone anymore, we have Zoom. And Zoom does offer some of the opportunities and things that we've talked about. I would echo Alderman Clevens, and I would like to see it continue. I know it has its quirks, but I do really appreciate, as somebody who has said for a long time, I want to hear from everybody, that it allows somebody who may not be able to get back in time, but want to put in, you know, some public comment to do it in a way that, or if they have a mobility issue, maybe they can't go out on the ice, maybe they, you know, it's hard for them to get up the 2 flights of stairs, but they really wanted to talk about substandard living conditions. I think that there's opportunities that it allows us to do, and we really have been able to work through. Is anything perfect right away? No, definitely not. But we have just proven that it does work. I also would like to say that I don't want it to be the norm. I can't imagine that I would want anyone to be chairing every single time, but in the times that when it has come up, there have been meetings where I was unavailable, the vice chair was unavailable, and now you're scrambling to get information and people there. And I just reject the thinking that someone can't effectively chair on Zoom. We did it for 2 years when we did it in this chamber. Is it best if we're here in person? Sure. It's much easier to be able to see who's in the gallery, and that is definitely the preference, but I don't think someone should be barred from being able to do the job that they are very steeped in as well. So if you are the chair, you're going back and forth, you know what's on the agenda. That is just, I think that knowledge transfer, for whatever reason, your kid has COVID, you have COVID, you have, you know, got a death in the family, there's extra steps there that also that you're missing if you're trying to pass it off to someone. So, Alderman Wilshire.
Thank you. I agree that Zoom has had its benefits, its pluses. I think that, you know, sitting here and getting a presentation from someone out in California who we want to buy police vests for, or, you know, something where we don't have to bring people in or pay for travel or hotel, whatever. You know, it has its benefits, even for the public. Like you said, you know, if someone's got mobility issues and can't come, then, you know, but I don't see it as a permanent thing for running meetings. It just doesn't work. I don't, well, it doesn't work for the aforementioned things, you know, quorum issue, you have to have, if you have a committee of 5, you have to have 3 people present to hold a meeting. And then if you don't, you have to depend on other people who may not even be on that committee. So there are some things I think are good about it and some things that I think are bad. Well, I'd like to see it stay for the purposes of getting presentations and, you know, that kind of stuff. But as a norm, I don't think so. And, you know, I don't begrudge Alderwoman Kelly or Alderman Laws for having families and lives, and, you know, that's not, you know, that shouldn't even be a discussion. I mean, people aren't out because they want to be out. She just ran again, so she wants to be here. It just doesn't feel right. I think we should be in person, we should be in the chamber, and that's just my take, sorry.
Oh, we have Alderman Sullivan has joined us online. I'm going to let him weigh in. Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just going to put my hand down electronically. Great discussion. I came up with a word tonight. It's called pandemic creep. And I wanted to make sure that wherever we are in this pandemic, if we're still in the middle or towards the end, I hope we're towards the end, that we have to start navigating back towards what normal looks like. And when I ran for office, there was a couple of things that I said to myself as I knew what the job description was. And here I am, oddly enough, speaking to you over Zoom, which has been a great tool to better understand city government, to better understand what's going on. It brings more people into the tent, which I think is a very good idea. However, when I ran for office, I knew what was required of me, and I signed up to do it. If I can't do it, then I would resign. And it, to me, would be in person as much as possible. Now, obviously, I tripped out of the starting gate because I got COVID and had to attend virtually. However, the other piece of it is, I think in order to run a committee, you want to be as effective as possible. I want to be an effective alderman for Ward 9. That means for me to be in person as much as possible. And that's why I think it's important. If I couldn't be there, or if there were certain issues with work or whatever, then I would raise my hand and said, please don't have me chair a committee because I won't be able to be there reliably. And so I just think that, you know, I'm gonna vote no tomorrow night when we do get it, but I just wanted to put my 2 cents in that I think we need to kind of put some guardrails up on the pandemic creep and start to move back to normal. Thanks.
Thank you, Alderman Sullivan. Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So I echo Alderman Clemmons with the not getting rid of Zoom. I think it has, to Alderman Sullivan's point, brought more people under the tent. It's great to have more community involvement in these meetings. And for people who can't make it for whatever reason, it's great to have them on Zoom and at least be able to hear what goes on. You know, my wife's probably watching right now and she's probably saying this is boring. But for people who are actually interested in it, they can listen. And I know you can watch it on TV as well, but you can't ask questions through your TV. So I think it's really important that we keep Zoom. And you know, I wish there was a way we could do this where we could use it for exceptions only or emergency, but you can't put a cap on it. That would be too hard to do. I mean, I get it because, you know, I try to go to every meeting even if I'm not on a committee, but once spring and summer comes and I'm out doing stuff with my kids and I come home and I'm, you know, filthy from coaching baseball, I'm not going to run to a meeting. I can just jump on Zoom and watch it. Now, I'm not chairing any committee, so, you know, for me it's fine, but I don't know, I just wish there was a way there was some kind of compromise where it could happen in a rare circumstance. I just don't know what that is, and it would be probably too difficult to kind of define that. But that's what I would like to see if there was, if I had a magic wand. So, thank you.
You don't have one right there? I thought that was what happens. when
I
you're elected
I
clerk.
do not,
No,
I do
okay.
not.
I'll make sure I bring it
An
next time.
Angry Letter University.
Alderman Kamal?
Yeah, just real briefly, just to touch on what several of the others have said over the last couple of minutes. I'm with Alderman Wilshire. One of the things that I would most like to see before the end of my term is a return to all in-person, ideally maskless meetings. I think that, we're closer to the end than the beginning, so hopefully we get there at some point. So I do think that as elected officials, we should be here as much as possible. I remember during the campaign saying variations of the phrase, like when I get to City Hall. I never told my constituents when I get home and get on my laptop. So I think that there is an expectation that we're going to be here. But to the point of the public, I love that they have the availability to Zoom in and ask questions. I think that it opens up access for a lot of members of the public that normally wouldn't either be able to get here or think of getting here for every meeting, but can log on and ask questions and have their concerns addressed. So I would like to see the Zoom option kept for that, and also for presentations, like Alderman Wilshire said, people that it's not feasible for them to get here. But for us, for the 15 of us, I think that it is feasible for us to be here, and that should be the goal. And if it's a COVID concern, like I said, I hope that we're closer to the end than not. So hopefully that's something that's going to go away, and I'd hate to make a permanent change to the process, based on something that we hope is close to being over. And I know that Alderman Clemens said that we could undo it later, but, that's just more process. If we're going to undo it, then why do it? We're not solving a problem, like I said before, and Alderman Tebow mentioned a compromise, and I think the compromise is that every chair has a vice chair. So it's not like if, Alderman Kelly wasn't here tonight, the meeting wouldn't happen. We'd still be able to have the meeting. So those processes are in place. The mechanisms are there for us to conduct business as usual, and that should be what we aim to do. Thank you.
Alderman Clemens, then Alderman Lopez.
I'm glad you all agree with 2010, Ben. At least you agree with one of me.
Yeah, is that Alderman Lopez?
Yes.
I feel like we might agree with 2020, Ben, too, because I don't believe you were a huge fan of switching to video in the first place. But back in 2020, we've been giving away free airtime to Zoom, by the way. It's not the only teleconferencing app out there.
Teleconferencing, yes.
We explicitly, and actually Alderman President Wilshire could probably confirm this if she recalls, but if I recall correctly, we arrived at using Zoom because we were trying to run a meeting in a virtual format, and there were a lot of security concerns with other platforms. There's Microsoft Teams, and the City Hall has access to the Microsoft suite. There's Google Meet, and that has its own accessibility features. Zoom particularly was chosen, and a lot of the difficulties and technical glitches that we experience because we can't use all of the Zoom features because we're trying to run the meeting and make sure that it's not interfered with while it's running. Now, if we have a presenter who's coming in and we're able to open up a Zoom channel explicitly speaking to that person or allowing them to present, that is a much more straightforward process. Likewise, if we're trying to have public comment, even that's easier because we can admin the public comment before and after sections, but we don't have to allow aldermen who may be calling in on the phone or maybe in and out connection, disconnecting and reconnecting, but central to the meeting and essential to the quorum and the documentation of the meeting. We don't need to keep all of those balls flying in the air. You don't even necessarily need to use Zoom as the recording platform for the entire meeting, maybe just the public comment. So a lot of opportunities open themselves to using teleconferencing to allow meeting access once we simplify the roles that are involved. So if we can meet in person and we can manage things and we have a setup with all of the computers, configured for what we need, and we're not trying to replicate that at home, but a different home whenever somebody else is chairing the meeting, and IT only has remote access, and we're adding all of these variables, then we're not distracting from the actual meeting. So I think it's possible for the public to watch all of our meetings live on TV. You can watch it on CTV. I recommend doing some sort of thing like folding or monotonous activity when you're watching this. It's not really that engaging. But it's already online and there is access. People can't comment on those through those forums though. And so that's what I think the teleconferencing preserves. And then if we have presentations from staff members who are in different areas, or if we have it from contractors, we can get more accurate information and we can bring people into the chamber that normally wouldn't be able to come into the chamber. So there's a lot of opportunities for teleconferencing, but I think we're in a crisis. We had to make things more complicated because we needed to record meetings. We need to make sure there's access for up to 600 people who had an opinion on whether or not we should be at home or not. It is a very difficult time with very difficult circumstances, but as was pointed out, pandemic creep, we don't need to operate under emergency conditions all the time. And I think when we do, we'll find out we probably learn things from emergencies and we discover these teleconferencing apps and things and how they can be enhanced. We just need to put them in perspective.
Great. I mean, I just want to, put a point on that. I think that's really the point here is that we all have talked about pros and cons here, and we are the personnel committee. And I think one of the things that has always gone through my mind with Zoom is that these city hall department heads, sometimes they're here as late as we are, 1, 2 in the morning, waiting to, give us that sort of feedback. So when you think about, allowing them the ability to have a different quality of life, be able to go home, make dinner, hop back on and give their spiel, I think that's important to keep in mind in terms of keeping Zoom, because they work really hard too, and they didn't run for this. So I think their service and that ability is important too. So, Alderman Gouvier.
Thank you.
Am I saying that right? Yeah.
GOV, up close.
GOV, okay.
Oh, trust me, it'll take some
Get
time.
in there. God, come on.
Thank you. No, I agree. I think Zoom should be here to stay, and I'd even take it to a step where I'm fine with older people attending meetings via Zoom and voting via Zoom. I just don't think you should be a presiding officer solely because I'd rather have that input and I'd rather have that voice than not have it at all. And obviously, yes, it comes down to a quorum number, and we need to make sure we have enough people here. But if we have enough people in the chamber, I don't have a problem with any of us taking it on Zoom. Would I rather have all of us here? Absolutely. I'll take that every day of the week instead. But I know realistically, it's just unlikely to happen at times. So I think Zoom should definitely be here to stay, or some other video conferencing application like Alderman Lopez said that could be more to our needs. But yeah, I think it should definitely be here to stay. Thank you.
Alderman Timmons?
Oh, thank you. After listening to all your comments, and I kind of agree with almost every single one of you guys, I think that we should have Zoom here to stay. However, we need to be there in person if you have to be. But there's circumstances where you can't. And if you can't, there should be advice that is guaranteed to be there when you cannot be there. And that's the point. Somebody have to be there. You shouldn't have to beg an alderman at large to come to a meeting. So the chair, sometimes it just don't work out that way. You never know what can happen. I can be a chair and something happened to me. I'm not able to go. I might be stuck in the emergency room. Who knows? All I know is that it's good to have the Zoom here, but it's also good to be there in person all the time if you have to be. And so everybody have valid points. Then I don't know how I'm going to vote tomorrow, but I think we should have Zoom. I was exposed to COVID, didn't know till today. I would have been there otherwise, but then I was told that I had COVID, was exposed to COVID. And I will tell some of you guys that I was around, that I was exposed to COVID. But that was my choice to come in, to be here on the Zoom versus coming in and exposing you guys. So the Zoom will work in a good place when you cannot be there. Otherwise, we should be there. I totally agree. We should be there. Make every effort possible to be at every meeting that you're a committee on or that you're chairing.
Thank you, Alderman Timmons. Alderman Timmons. Alderman Wilshire.
Thank you. We did start out with WebEx, and they had a lot of problems with WebEx, and we ended up going to Zoom. One of the concerns I mentioned earlier is the videographers aren't really Zoom people, that's not their job. And with the amount of work, added work they've had because of that, 12-hour days, I think Jeff's been putting in, and some of them when we have, especially during budget season. We may have to hire someone part-time or whatever just to do that because, yeah, Kim told me that it's too much for the videographers to take this on permanently. And, yeah, I think that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Walsh. Alderman Clegg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This conversation's gone away from whether or not the chair should be able to do it. It's kind of, to talk about creep, it's kind of gone into whether or not we should have Zoom. So I'm just gonna make it go a little further. Why reel everybody in when I can go a little further? As a state rep and up in the State House, I attend my committee meetings there. Zoom is not allowed for anyone, for the public, for presenters, for anyone. However, they have created a newer system where you can get on to the system and you can upload your opinion. So that the public can go in and put their opinion right there. And I, as a state rep, I can go in and see it immediately. It doesn't have to go through the administrative person. And it does all become part of the notes and the minutes and so on from it. And that's the way it's done there in the state. And I'm not saying that we should be like the state. I'm just saying is that we can still give access to the public even if we didn't have Zoom. There are other innovative ways of doing it. I can tell you, anybody here, go talk to Jeff. He and his crew, I'm here early, and anybody who's been here early sees exactly what he goes through with Zoom. Zoom is not the only technology, but it was the one that worked the best, and it's one we have license for, and we would have to recreate and relearn everything else, and I'm not sure we really want to go down that path either. There are alternatives to Zoom, as I said, in the State House. I can literally sit at meetings and know how many people are for it, how many people are opposed to it in the public, and written testimony that they've put in there, as well as things that do come through email and so on. So there are ways of the public being able to be heard, to get the attention that they need, and there are like I said, little voting mechanisms. I'm not saying we adopt them all, but those may be some of the things that we need to look at too, to make sure that the public their voice gets heard. I would rather, my opinion is to keep Zoom to just those employees that have to do presentations, because we do ask a lot of them. Oftentimes, I've been here and I see Director Kleiner here early in the morning and here late at night. I see the same thing for Director Cummings and Mr. Griffin and so on. We ask a lot of them, and I could go with the presentations there, but I do think there are alternatives to make sure that the public is heard without necessarily having to be here or never have to be speaking. There are other alternatives, and we're doing it in the State House, and it's successful. And I'm finding it as a state rep, I get real-time information right there on my screen, and it gets literally attached to that piece of legislation. I pull up the piece of legislation, I see what people's opinions were, I see how many people from the public voted. It's a great tool. So just putting it out there, so just to add to the creep.
Okay, so the motion is to recommend final passage. We all set? Everybody good?
I was just impressed with the state.
That's side conversations. I was repeating our motion is to recommend final passage. Are we good? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
You want roll?
Which ones were the nay?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do it by roll call so we can hear.
Alderman Clemmons.
Yes.
Alderman Govea.
No.
Alderman Lopez.
No.
Alderman Tebow's a yes. Alderwoman Kelly.
Yes.
3-2, it passes to the board.
right. Okay. We are moving on. Thank you for the lively discussion. Tabled in committee.
Alderman Clemens'
Oh,
hand is
sorry.
up.
That's okay. Just a point, and this might be through you to the president. I believe by the way that, and I only bring this up because I think one of the aldermen mentioned it being on the agenda tomorrow night. I don't think it will be until the next meeting in February.
Unless we
And
don't
that, yeah, and so it won't be, to anybody listening or whatever, this isn't gonna
On
be
Zoom.
on the agenda tomorrow night, it's gonna be at the next meeting in February, so just so everybody's clear.
Rookie mistake.
And that's a really good point, Alderman Clemens, because we meet the night before aldermanic meetings. The only
It's
time
not
we
an,
suspend-
right, and this
We only
isn't time
suspend if it's something
sensitive.
that's time sensitive. This is not time sensitive, so it'll be up in 2 weeks, correct?
Yep.
Thank you for that. Okay, everybody else set?
No, I have a question.
Alderman Timmons.
Yes, on the Board of Aldermen, we would amend the agenda. Do they do that with the Board of Aldermen? I'm not, just a question.
I'm sorry, what's the question?
The question is, can they amend the agenda? It's not on the agenda for tomorrow, but we all periodically amend the agendas. So I was wondering if they can amend the agenda. I didn't see that in the book that you cannot amend the agenda. To put it on the agenda for tomorrow if need to be.
Alderman Wilshire?
There's nothing urgent or time sensitive about it. The legislative manager has to type the minutes and people haven't seen them. There's nothing time sensitive. There's nothing urgent, so I would not recommend that.
Yes.
Just
Thank you.
ask them questions.
Can I-
Alderman Clemens, go ahead.
Thank you. Just to go further so the new members know, so sometimes you'll see where if we have it, for example, the union contract, I believe that we passed, right, was time sensitive in a way. And so if you have a meeting the night before, like this one, before, or a couple of days before the next Board of Aldermen meeting, what will happen is the president will ask the committee chair to do an oral report of that committee and what happened. And then the Board of Aldermen has to suspend the rules to allow for that legislation to come forward. We do that from time to time when it's things that are very time sensitive, union contracts, if there's another contract that, if we don't buy it now, the price goes up 10%. Stuff like that, we will do that for this, where it's more of a internal, what kind of rules are we gonna follow, that type of thing. We tend to let the agenda go. And you'll see often that at this committee, just because of the way the timing works, that things that come before this committee often wait another 2 weeks for the following Board of Aldermen meeting. And it can be frustrating on this committee, but it's always been a timing thing. And so from time to time, if there's appointments that need to get done or whatever, or other legislation, you'll see that process happen. But generally speaking, we let stuff go following the regular agenda. So that's kind of how, I think that answers your question, I hope.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yep,
Awesome. Okay. All set?
yes.
All right, tabled in committee.
None?
Public comment. Please state your name and address for the record.
Laura Cajon?
I'm sorry, Laura, we're gonna do in the chamber first.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Lori Ortolano, 41 Berkeley Street. Just wanted to give you, something that came across my phone right now that was from the Atlantic, because I get the electronic subscription. New Jersey, Delaware, and Connecticut will end their mask mandates in schools next month. I'm particularly excited about that, and would like to see the Nashua schools follow suit. I'd like to share with you, I like the discussion on the meetings. I'm going to send some written testimony in. I think Zoom should be maintained. And I think my experience up at the State House for the last month plus 5 weeks has been awesome, being able to go live without a mask and talk to people. I talked to people, elected representatives before and after meetings, and they have sought me out to come participate in other bills. and do a lot of work up there, and that would never happen if it was Zoom. So I'm really appreciative of that. I wanted to let you know that I did file a pro se lawsuit regarding email and data storage, and I want to share a little information about that. I've had a lot of concerns with data and records in the city, and because I have a captive or audience of elected people here, I want to talk about it. I got the ruling from the court today, and the judge ruled in my favor. And I tried to get 2 months of emails from an employee who left in the end at Christmas time last year, November, December, and the city denied them as not reasonably accessible and didn't give any reason why. And that's what concerned me, is I got no reason. So the court said, first, to the extent the city contends that it need not search the backup tapes because that added time renders the search unduly burdensome, the court disagrees. As discussed above, the city has the technological capability to retrieve responsive documents from backup tapes and has already done so with respect to an unrelated record request. Mr. Mercivist also testified that the time it would take to restore a backup tape that would have located those responsive documents to the petitioner's request should only take a couple of hours. This additional time does not render the results search so time-consuming as to obviate the city from having to perform the search. Then the court said there is nothing in the record to indicate that there are no practical obstacles to assessing the backup system in order to comply with the petitioner's request. For instance, the city is not alleging it would need to heavily redact the emails once located. It says, finally, the court disagrees with the city that it is not required to search the backup tapes because such a search is incompatible with the own document retrieval system. The court did not find searching the backup tapes the backup tapes would be incompatible with the city's retrieval system. Based on the foregoing, the court finds that the city has not met its burdens to show that the search of the backup tape was not required. It did not perform an adequate search per 91A, and the court grants the petitioner's motion to compel the city to conduct a search. It then concluded that I could submit a record to ask, the court ordered the city to undergo training, and that I could submit a record within the next 30 days to do training. And, I think we have a lot to do with our record retention system here in the city. A lot of work to do. Thank you.
I would appreciate if you would put that in written, because I know you were trying to get it in your 3 minutes, but there was a lot of information there, so make sure you submit that, please.
Say that again?
I didn't hear everything, because you said you were going to follow up with written testimony. So I was just hoping that you would do so.
Oh, yeah, on the
Zoom.
I will. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it to the board meeting when you do it.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Ms. Calhoun.
I don't have to give my address, right? No. Anyway, I just wanted to say that.
For the record, every time you talk.
I mean, it's probably.
I just wanted to say that the Zoom went blank
Ms. Calhoun,
after
can you
John
please
Sullivan.
State your name and address for the record.
Laura Cohn, 30 Greenwood Drive. I just wanted to say the Zoom picture went blank after John Sullivan. So all you see is a blank screen. So Zoom isn't the best. And that's a problem because sometimes it's very difficult. Alderman Kelly was very difficult to hear through the Zoom. And yes, I'm waiting to get back to City Hall once the mandate on the masks are over with. Thank you.
Thank you. Am I a little bit better there? I may not, my computer is in the way. I'll make sure I lean into my microphone next time. I don't see anyone else in the public. Just making sure I didn't miss anyone. We don't have a possible non-public. Do I have a motion? Oh, I'm sorry. I missed 2 lines.
Yep.
Sorry. Any general discussion? Remarks by Alderman. Okay, now we can go to we do not have a possible non-public. Do I have a motion?
Yes.
Alderman Clemmons.
Motion to adjourn.
The motion is to adjourn. We don't need to do a roll call. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No, Alderman Lopez? All right, our meeting is closed at 8:39 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Do I hit anything here?
Yep.